I have told this story maybe 400 times now. To recruits, to my own offspring, to strangers in dock bars who do not believe a word of it until I show them the recording chit, and even then some of them walk away shaking their heads. I will tell it to you the way it happened, slow, the way I lived it. My name does not matter much, but you can call me Cell. Back then I was barely past my second molt, an apprentice grade 3, which in human terms means I was a teenager who thought he knew things. I worked the forge bays on resupply station Hennick 9, a rust-colored donut of a station hanging over a dead moon at the edge of the Ressar corridor. It was not a glamorous posting. Nobody asks to go to Hennick 9. You get sent there when the war machine needs hands and does not care whose. Freighters came in heavy and left light. Soldiers came in broken and left patched. And in between, the forge bays glowed and hissed and clanged for 20 hours a cycle, and apprentices like me ran tools and carried plating and tried not to get our fingers crushed. That is where I met her. Though met is a generous word, you do not meet people like Senna Verde, you witness them. Let me set it down properly. The forge bay smelled like hot metal and coolant and the sour tang of welded ceramic. Always. You stopped noticing it after a week, and then you noticed nothing else for the rest of your life. Even now, decades later, when I smell scorched alloy, I am back there, 16 and clumsy, dropping a torque driver and watching it skitter under a gantry. The light in there was orange. The big furnace at the far wall threw it across everything, so every face looked like it was carved out of embers. The noise was constant, the deep industrial heartbeat of the station, the whine of grinders, the clank of armor plates being hung on racks like the shells of giant dead insects. And in the corner, at bench 9, worked the human. We did not get many humans on Hennick 9. The galaxy had only properly known about them for one generation by then. Earth had come out of its corner of the dark swinging, and the older species, the Dravoshi, the Estheni like me, the cold logical veil, they were still adjusting to the idea that the small, soft bipeds from the blue world were not, in fact, a joke. But that adjustment had not fully reached Hennick 9. Out here, a human was still a curiosity, a topic for the break room, something to stare at and whisper about when you thought she could not hear. She could always hear. Senna Verde was not large. By Dravoshi standards, she was tiny, barely up to a soldier's chest plate. By my standards, she was about my height, which made her smaller than most of the techs in the bay. She had dark hair she kept cropped close and tied back, gray at the temples, though I could never guess her age. Her skin was the brown of old leather. Her hands, and this I noticed first, because hands are everything in a forge. Her hands were a map of old burns and small white scars, the kind you only get from years of reaching into places you should not reach into. She wore the gray coverall of a contract artificer. No rank, no unit patch, nothing that told you who she was or where she had come from, just a name stitched over the chest pocket, VARED, and a quiet that followed her around like a second shadow. She kept to herself. She ate alone. She worked faster and cleaner than anyone in the bay and never once bragged about it, which somehow made it worse for the others, because there is nothing more irritating to a mediocre worker than excellence that does not need an audience. The senior tech, a heavy-set Dravoshi named Brask, hated her on sight. I should tell you about Brask because he matters. Brask had spent 30 cycles in the forge bays and considered himself the master of benchwork in that entire sector. He was not wrong, exactly. He was good. But he was the kind of good that had stopped growing a long time ago, the kind that defends its territory instead of expanding it. He had a wide, flat head and a heavier set of jaw tusks than most, and he used them when he talked, clicking them together for emphasis like a man cracking his knuckles. When the contract office assigned Senna to his bay, he complained loudly to anyone who would listen. "A human," he said the first morning, loud enough for her to hear. "They send me a human. What does a human know about Dravoshi warplate? Their whole species is younger than my coolant lines." Senna did not look up from her work. She just kept stripping a corroded seal ring out of a damaged greave, her fingers steady, her face calm. They float up out of their little gravity well, Brask went on, warming to it, and suddenly they think they can wear our armor, fix our armor. Next they will want to teach us how to die properly. A couple of the junior techs laughed. They always laughed at Brask's jokes. It was safer than not laughing. I did not laugh. I do not say that to make myself sound noble. I did not laugh because I was busy, and because I was a little afraid of the human, the way you are afraid of something you do not understand. But I remember watching her, watching the way she did not react, and I remember thinking that her stillness was a strange kind of strength, like a wall that does not bother to argue with the wind. That was the first day. I want you to hold on to Brask. He gets worse before he gets better, and what changes him is the heart of this whole story. The days went on. The war did what wars do. It fed the station a steady diet of broken soldiers and broken machines, and we fixed what we could and recycled what we could not. I started slowly to gravitate toward Bench 9. Not because I was brave, because I was curious and because Senna, unlike Brask, did not snap at apprentices. The first time I spoke to her directly, I had been sent to fetch a fusion coupler and could not find the right grade in the supply crib. I was sweating. The supply officer was screaming at someone over the comm. I was about to make a very expensive mistake by grabbing the wrong part when a voice behind me said, "Quiet." Not that one. The blue band. The red bands for atmospheric work. You put a red band coupler in a vacuum-rated suit and it'll crack the first time the soldier steps outside. I turned. It was her. She had come to the crib for her own parts and seen me about to ruin a man's armor. "Thank you," I said. I think my voice cracked. She gave me a small nod and a smaller smile, took her parts and went back to her bench. That was all, but for me it was something. She had not laughed at me. She had simply stopped me from being wrong. After that, I found reasons to be near Bench 9, and I started to learn things. I learned that Senna veered new armor the way a healer knows a body. She did not just bolt plates together, she read them. She would run her scarred fingers along a seam and tell you where the soldier had been hit, how hard, from what angle. She would hold a cracked pauldron up to the orange light and say, "He turned into this. He saw it coming and he turned into it instead of away. Brave, stupid, both." And she was always right. I learned that she never wasted a movement. Brask's work was loud, lots of hammering, lots of cursing, lots of showing off. Senna's work was silent and exact. Her tools never slipped. Her welds were so clean they looked grown rather than made. And I learned that she always wore a wrap of dark cloth around her left wrist, even in the heat, even when sweat soaked her coverall through. The wrap never came off. I noticed it, but I did not think about it. Everyone has their habits. Brask had a lucky wrench he would not let anyone touch. The Vale who ran the diagnostic station refused to work facing the door. People are strange. I assumed the wrist strap was just Senna's strangeness. I was wrong, of course, but I would not learn how wrong until the day Koreth came in. I need to slow down here, because this is where it turns. It was a heavy cycle. A whole battalion had come through the Ressar corridor after a bad engagement near the Veth cluster. I won't pretend I understood the strategy. I was a teenager with a torque driver, and the forge bays were drowning in damaged plate. Soldiers everywhere. The waiting racks were full. The furnace ran so hot the air shimmered. And in the middle of all of it walked a soldier who made the whole bay go quiet. You have to understand what a quiet bay means. The forge bays of Hennick 9 were never quiet. Noise was the baseline of our existence. For a room full of hardened text to go still, something had to walk in that demanded it. Koreth of the Dravoshi demanded it. He was huge even for his kind. The Dravoshi are big. Think of something built like a bipedal bull, slabs of muscle under gray hide, those jaw tusks I mentioned. Koreth was bigger than big, and he wore the markings of a war leader, a karvesh, which in their hierarchy is roughly a battle captain who has personally led soldiers into the worst of it and walked back out. His armor told the story before he said a word. It was scarred to ruin. The left side was caved in where something enormous had hit him. There were burn scars across the chest plate, deep gouges in the pauldrons, and a crack running through the helm housing that should, by every law of physics I understood, have killed him. He had walked off a battlefield that had tried very hard to bury him, and he had walked into our bay because his armor needed a forge master who could bring it back. Brask practically tripped over himself getting to the front. "Karvesh," he said, dropping into the half-bow the Dravoshi use for their war leaders. "An honor. I am senior artificer of this bay. I will personally—" "No," said Korath. Just that, one word, in a voice like rocks grinding together. Brask blinked. "Karvesh." Korath's eyes, yellow, slow, ancient feeling, moved across the bay, past Brask, past the junior techs, past me where I stood frozen with an armful of seal rings. They stopped on bench 9. "On the human." "Hers," said Korath. "I want her." You could have heard a coolant drip hit the floor. Brask's jaw tusks clicked hard. "Karvesh, with respect, she is a contract artificer, a human. She does not know Dravoshi warplate the way I have heard of her," Korath said, and there was something in his voice I could not place yet, something that sounded almost like caution. "On the line, there is a name passed among soldiers who come back from the deep engagements. They say there is a human on Hennick 9 who can fix what cannot be fixed. They say her work does not fail." He looked at Brask, and there was no cruelty in it, just absolute certainty. "I have buried soldiers because their armor failed. I will not gamble my next campaign on pride, hers or yours." Brask had no answer to that. He stepped aside. I have never seen a male of any species deflate so completely. And Senna Verd stood up from her bench. She wiped her hands on a rag. She looked at the enormous, ruined war leader standing in the orange light, and she did not flinch, and she did not bow, and she did not look impressed. "Bring it to bench 9, she said. "All of it, helm 2. I remember the way the other techs looked at each other. A human, ordering a Karvesh around like he was a recruit. It should have been laughable. It was not. There was something in the way she said it, flat, professional, the voice of someone who has earned the right to be obeyed and does not need to explain why, that made even Korath simply nod and start unbuckling his ruined plate. And so I got to watch the best forge work of my life from 3 meters away, because I made very sure to be the apprentice assigned to fetch her tools. She worked on his armor for a full cycle and a half, almost 2 days. I want to tell you about that, because it mattered, and because it is when I started to understand what kind of person I was watching. She started with the helm. The crack in the housing was bad, a fracture that ran straight through the structural spine of it. Brask, I learned later, would have replaced the whole housing. Faster, cheaper, but Senna did not. "You replace it, you lose the calibration," she explained, half to me and half to herself, the way craftspeople talk when they are deep in a thing. His helm's been refitted to his skull shape over years. New housings, a stranger sitting on his head. In a fight, half a second of distraction because something doesn't sit right, that's how soldiers die. So we don't replace, we heal. And she healed it. She drilled tiny stop holes at the ends of the crack so it could not spread. She cut a channel along the fracture, cleaned it, and laid in a weld so fine I had to lean close to even see it, building it up layer by patient layer, letting it cool between passes so the metal would not warp. It took her 6 hours. Brask would have done it in 1. Hers would last, his would not. That was the difference, and it was the whole difference. She worked on the chest plate next. The caved-in section was the worst of it. Whatever had hit Korath had nearly punched through. A lesser tech would have hammered it back out and called it done. Senna cut the damaged section away entirely, formed a new piece from raw stock and grafted it in, matching the curve so exactly that when she was finished you could not tell where the old metal ended and the new began. She tempered it. She stress-tested it. She did it again. Korath watched the whole time. He did not leave the bay. He sat on a bench against the wall, this mountain of a war leader, and he watched the small human rebuild the shell that would stand between him and death, and he said almost nothing. But on the second day he started to talk to her, low, the way soldiers talk to each other. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. Senna did not look up from her work, here and there. "That is not an answer. It's the one you're getting." I held my breath. You do not talk to a Karvesh like that. But Korath only made a low sound, the Dravoshi version of a chuckle, deep in his chest. "You fix armor like someone who has worn it," he said. For the first time, Senna's hands paused, just for a moment, then they kept moving. "Everybody's worn something," she said. He let it go, but I saw him watching her differently after that. The way you watch someone when a suspicion has taken root and you are waiting for it to bloom. The second night the bay emptied out. Shift change. Most of the techs cleared off to eat or sleep. Brask left last, glaring at bench 9, muttering, "I should have gone too, I was off shift." But I stayed, pretending to organize the tool crib because I did not want to miss whatever this was. So I was there. I was the only one there besides the two of them when it happened. Senna was finishing the left greave. The work was nearly done. Korath's armor hung on the rack beside her, restored, gleaming dully in the furnace light, looking less like a ruin and more like the war shell of a leader again. She had her sleeves rolled up. The heat had gotten to her, and in reaching across the bench for a sealing tool, the dark cloth wrap around her left wrist had slid down. Just a little, just enough. Korath went absolutely still. I did not understand at first. I followed his gaze to her wrist and saw a scar. Old, white against her brown skin. A mark, deliberate, burned or branded into the flesh in a pattern. A circle, and within it the shape of a small rayed sun, and beneath that, 3 marks like notches. I did not know what it was, but Korath did. He rose from the bench, slowly, all those slabs of muscle unfolding. And the strangest thing, the thing I will never forget, is that this enormous war leader, this Karvesh who had walked off a battlefield that killed everyone around him, took a step back, away from her, as if the small human at the bench had suddenly become the most dangerous thing in the room. "That mark," he said, his voice had changed. The grinding rock confidence was gone. "On your wrist, show me." Senna had already pulled the wrap back up. Her face had gone flat and careful, the wall back in place. "It's nothing, an old burn." "It is not a burn." Korath's yellow eyes had narrowed. "I have seen that mark twice in my life, once on a recording in the war archive of my house, and once—" he stopped. Something moved across his heavy features, an emotion I could not name. "Once on the wrist of the only being I have ever truly feared. Take off the wrap." The bay was silent except for the furnace. I stood frozen in the shadows by the crib, forgotten, holding a tray of seal rings I had forgotten I was holding. For a long moment Senna did not move. Then slowly she set down her tools. She looked at Korath, really looked at him. For the first time, the professional distance gone, and something in her seemed to make a decision. She reached over. She unwound the dark cloth from her left wrist, and she held it up to the orange light so he could see the full mark. "The Earthborn seal," Korath said. The words came out of him like a breath he had been holding for years. "You wear the Earthborn seal." "I do," said Senna Verd. And that, I would learn, was the moment everything changed. But to understand why a battle captain stepped back in fear, you have to understand what that mark meant. And to understand that, you have to understand what humans had done in the war that gave it to them. Korath sat back down, heavily, like his legs had stopped trusting him. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me how a contract artificer rotting on a backwater forge station came to wear the seal that the Veil themselves refused to speak of." And Senna Verd, quiet Senna, who ate alone, who never bragged, who let a fool like Brask insult her for days without a flicker, pulled up a stool, sat down across from the war leader, and began to talk. I did not move. I did not breathe louder than I had to. I was a 16-year-old apprentice who had just realized he was standing in the middle of a story that would outlive him. "You want to know about the seal," she said. "Then I have to tell you about Commerce Station. You know the name." Korath went rigid. Everyone knows the name. Commerce Station was a slaughter, 40,000 dead. The Vale withdrew their fleet. It was the worst defeat of the early war. He paused. There were no survivors. Senna looked at him, and she smiled, and it was not a happy smile. "There were 11 survivors," she said, "and they did not let us speak about it afterward because of what we did to live." I will tell you what she told him. I will tell it the way she told it, because I have replayed it in my mind 10,000 times since, and the words are carved into me now. But the shift change horn sounded then, the long, low blast that meant the next crew was coming, that the bay was about to fill again with noise and bodies and prying eyes. Senna stopped. She wound the cloth back around her wrist, hiding the seal, the wall sliding back into place over her face. "Not here," she said quietly, "not with ears around." Korath nodded slowly. "Then where?" "Your armor's done." She stood, gestured at the gleaming, restored warshell on the rack. "You came for a repair, you got one. Best work you'll find this side of the corridor, and it'll hold. That's all the station needs to know." She met his eyes. "The rest of it, the seal, Kamir, what I am that stays between us. You understand me, Karvesh. I've spent 11 years being nobody on purpose. I'm not about to stop because one war leader has good eyes." Korath was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something I have never seen a Dravoshi of his rank do for anyone, let alone a human a third his size. He bowed fully, forehead low, the bow they give only to those who have earned the right to be feared. "Your secret is mine to guard," he said, "on my house, on my dead." And that should have been the end of it. A secret kept, a debt acknowledged, a war leader leaving with the best armor on the station, and a story he would carry to his grave. It was not the end of it, because Brask had come back for his lucky wrench, and Brask was standing in the bay doorway, and Brask had heard the words Earthborn seal and Commerce Station, and his small mind was already turning them over, already calculating what a secret like that might be worth to the right buyer. I saw him in the doorway. Senna and Korath did not, and I, 16, terrified, loyal to a human who had only ever shown me kindness, I made the first real choice of my adult life. I dropped my tray of seal rings. The clatter was enormous. It echoed off every metal surface in the bay. Senna and Korath spun toward the sound toward me, and in that same instant Brask stepped back out of the doorway, quick for a heavy mail, and pretended he had only just been arriving. "Sell," Senna snapped, half relief, half anger, seeing only her clumsy apprentice. "What in the void are you still doing here?" "Sorry," I stammered, scrambling to gather the rings. "Sorry, I was organizing, I'll go." But my eyes flicked to the doorway, and Korath, who missed nothing, followed them, and he saw the back of Brask's wide gray head disappearing down the corridor. The war leader and the human exchanged a single look. They knew that someone had heard. They just did not yet know how much or what he would do with it. I had seen Brask's face. I had seen the greed bloom in his small, flat eyes. And I knew, with the cold certainty of a frightened teenager, that the quiet life Senna Verde had built for herself on Hennick 9 had just ended. What I did not know, what none of us knew yet, was that Brask selling the secret would not destroy Senna at all. It would summon the very thing she had been hiding from for 11 years, and it would force the small, quiet human at Bench 9 to become, one last time, the thing that had earned her the Earthborn seal in the first place. But that is part 2, and I need to tell you what the seal meant first. I need to tell you about Commerce Station and the 11 who lived, and what humans are willing to do that the rest of the galaxy is not. So let me back up. Let me tell you what Senna told Korath, later, in the quiet of his quarters, with me crouched outside the door like the eavesdropping coward I was, because I could not stay away, because some part of me already knew I was witnessing the only important thing I would ever witness. She told him about Khmer. Part 1 continues, Khmer Station flashback. Khmer Station, she said, was a forward fuel depot in the early years, when humans were new to the war and the old species still thought of Earth's soldiers as expendable. Useful, maybe. Tough, surprisingly. But expendable. You put humans where you did not want to lose your own. So they put a human garrison on Khmer, 1,100 of them, with a token Veil command element. And they told them to hold the depot against a raiding force that everyone knew was too large to hold against. They expected us to die, Senna said, her voice flat in the dark of the quarters. That was the plan. Slow the enemy down. Buy the real fleet 3 days. 1,100 humans for 3 days. Good math if you're the one writing the equation and not the variable in it. The raiders came. Not a raiding force, a war host. The Veil command element took one look at the sensor returns, declared the position lost, and withdrew their cruiser. Left the humans. 1,100 soldiers on a fuel depot with the enemy inbound and no way out. They thought we'd surrender, Senna said. Or break. That's what you do when the math says you've already lost. You stop spending lives on a sum you can't win. She was quiet for a moment. We didn't surrender, we didn't break, we held. Korath's voice low, for 3 days. For 19. I heard the war leader exhale. 19 days. 1,100 humans against a war host, on a station built to store fuel, not to fight. They held it the way humans hold things, not with superior numbers or superior weapons, because they had neither, but with a kind of stubbornness the galaxy had never properly catalogued. They turned the fuel depot into a weapon. They booby-trapped corridors. They fought in the dark, in vacuum, hand to hand when the power cells ran dry. They sealed off sections and vented them with the enemy inside. They did things, Senna said, that she would not describe in detail, because some of them still woke her up at night 11 years later. By the 9th day there were 200 of us. By the 15th, 40, we'd stopped being a garrison. We were just a thing that would not die. The enemy started calling us a name in their own tongue. The intercepts translated it as the ones who stay. They were afraid of us. A war host of 100,000, afraid of 40 humans who would not leave. Why? Korath asked, and I understood the question under the question. Why didn't you run? You were left to die. The position was lost. Any sane commander withdraws. Why did you stay? Senna was quiet for a long time. Because there were 3,000 civilians in the lower depot, she said finally. Refugees, routed through Khmer on their way to the core worlds. The Veil cruiser had room for soldiers or refugees, not both. It chose soldiers, its own people, the command element, left the refugees with us. A pause. We could have taken the maintenance skiffs. 40 soldiers, 11 skiffs. We could have run on day 9 and most of us would have lived. But the skiffs only carried soldiers, not 3,000 civilians. So if we ran, they died. So you stayed. So we stayed, and we held the lower depot, 19 days, until the real fleet finally arrived late, the way fleets always are, and broke the siege and found 40,000 dead in the corridors of Khmer and 3,000 civilians alive in the lower depot, and 11 human soldiers still standing guard over them. 11 out of 1,100. The dark of the quarters was absolute. I pressed myself against the corridor wall and did not breathe. They gave us the seal, Senna said, the Earthborn seal. The galaxy doesn't have many honors that cross species lines, but that's one. They burned it into our wrists, the raid sun for Saul, the 3 notches for the 3,000 we saved. And then, her voice went very quiet, and then they classified the whole thing, sealed the records. Because the truth of Khmer was that the old species left 1,100 humans and 3,000 civilians to die for a fuel depot, and humans were the only ones who refused the math. That's not a story the Veil wanted told. So they gave us the highest honor in the galaxy, and then ordered us never to speak of how we earned it. And the 11 of you, scattered, hidden, told to live quiet lives and never wear the seal where it could be seen. Some of us got new identities. Some of us just disappeared into stations like this one, became contract artificers on backwater forges, became nobody on purpose. She laughed, soft and bitter. I fix armor now, Korath. I keep other soldiers alive so they don't have to learn what I learned. It's a good, quiet life. I earned a good, quiet life. A long silence. Then Korath spoke, and his rock-grinding voice was gentle in a way I had not known it could be. The being I feared, he said. The one I saw wear that mark years ago. It was a recording from Kamir, the last transmission. A human soldier wounded standing over the civilians in the lower depot, telling the enemy in their own tongue that they would have to come through her. My warhouse keeps that recording as a teaching. We show it to every young Karvesh. We say, this is what it means to hold a line. This is what the Earthborn are. He paused. I have feared that soldier my whole career. I have measured myself against her and found myself wanting. Another pause, longer. Senaverd, was that recording you? And from inside the dark quarters, very quietly, the human said, turn the wrap, look at the notches. Kamir's seal has 3. Only the 11 who held the lower depot got 3 notches. Everyone else who got the seal that war got 2. I heard Korath move. I heard the rustle of cloth. I heard the war leader of the Dravoshi make a sound I will never forget. A low, broken, reverent sound. The sound of a soldier meeting the thing he had measured his entire life against. It was you, he whispered. The line that did not break, it was you. And outside in the corridor, 16 years old, hidden in the dark, I finally understood what I was looking at. Not a contract artificer. Not a quiet human who ate alone. A legend. A myth the old species told their children. A soldier who had refused the math the entire galaxy accepted and lived, and chosen to spend the rest of her life keeping others alive so they would never have to make the choice she made. I should have felt awe, and I did. But mostly I felt fear, because I had seen Brask's face, and I knew that this secret, the location of one of the 11, one of the Kamir survivors, the soldier from the recording, was worth more than Brask would make in 10 lifetimes of forge work. He was going to sell her, and when he did, every faction in the corridor that had ever wanted to capture, kill, or claim an Earthborn would come to Hennick 9. I had to warn her. That is where part 1 ends, with me in the dark making the choice to run toward the danger instead of away from it. Because I had spent weeks watching a small, quiet human do exactly that, and something of her had gotten into me, and it would not let me leave. Part 2. Brask did not sell her right away. I want you to know that. I have thought about it for decades, and I have come to believe that even Brask, even that small, greedy male, hesitated, not out of decency, out of fear. Because the kind of buyer who pays for an Earthborn is not the kind of buyer you walk away from clean. But greed is patient, and it wears a person down. It took Brask 3 days to make the call. I spent those 3 days trying to warn Senna, and failing, because I was a coward about it in exactly the way teenagers are cowards. I would walk toward bench 9 with the words ready in my mouth. Brask heard you, Brask knows. You have to leave. And then I would lose my nerve, because to say it out loud was to admit I had been hiding in the dark, listening to a story that was never meant for my ears. So I said nothing, and I have carried that, the 3 days I could have given her and did not. What finally forced my hand was the ship. I was on the early shift, hauling slag from the furnace pit, when the docking klaxon sounded for an unscheduled arrival. We did not get unscheduled arrivals on Hennick 9. Everything that came to us was logged a week out. An unscheduled ship meant trouble, and the whole bay knew it, and we all drifted toward the viewport without being told to. The ship that slid into dock was long and dark and bore no faction markings at all. That was the frightening part. A warship with no flag is a warship that does not want to be traced. It was Vale built. I could tell from the cold, angular lines, but the veil did not fly unmarked. Nobody legitimate did. I knew, the way you know things in your gut before your mind catches up, that this ship had come for Senna. I dropped my slag hook and I ran. I found her at bench 9, of course. Where else? She was finishing a routine greave repair, calm as still water, and when I skidded to a stop in front of her, she looked up with mild irritation. "Sell what now?" "There's a ship," I gasped. "No markings, veil lines. It just docked unscheduled and Senna Brask heard you, 3 days ago, with the Carvesh. He was in the doorway, I saw him, I dropped the ring so he'd think nobody noticed, but he heard. He heard about the seal and Kamir, and I think he sold you, I think that ship is." I ran out of breath and words at the same time. For a moment Senna Verde did not move at all. Then she set down her tool, carefully, the way she did everything, and the wall came down over her face, not the careful nobody wall she wore for the bay, but a different one, older, harder, a wall I had not seen before, and I understood, looking at it, that I was seeing the soldier from the recording, the one who had stood in the lower depot of Kamir and told a war host they would have to come through her. "How many days did you sit on this?" she said, not angry, worse than angry, quiet. "3, I whispered. "I'm sorry, I was scared, I'm sorry." She closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, the anger was gone, folded away somewhere I could not see, because there was no time for it. "All right," she said. "All right. Listen to me, Sel. You're going to go to the supply crib and you're going to stay there and you're going to keep your head down until this is over. You hear me? Whatever happens out here, you stay down." "What's going to happen?" She did not answer that. She reached under her bench and pulled out a tool roll I had seen 100 times and never thought twice about, and she unrolled it, and inside, nested between the calibration tools, was a sidearm. Old, human-made, worn smooth in the grip from years of being held. "You kept a weapon," I said stupidly. "I keep a lot of things." She checked the charge with the same economy of motion she used for everything. 11 years, Sel. You don't survive being one of the 11 by assuming the quiet life lasts. She tucked the weapon into her coverall. "Now go, crib, down, go." I did not go. I want that on the record too, since I have already confessed my cowardice. The one brave thing I did in this whole story is that when Senna Verde told me to hide, I disobeyed her. I went as far as the crib, and then I stopped, and I crouched behind the supply racks where I could see the whole bay through the gaps, and I stayed. Because I was not going to let her face it with no witness. If they took her, if they killed her, somebody had to remember. Somebody had to be able to tell it. And I had already decided in that moment that the somebody would be me. The ones from the ship came 20 minutes later. There were 6 of them. Veil, 4 of them, tall, pale, expressionless, those flat reflective eyes that never seemed to blink, and 2 others I did not recognize, mercenary types, heavily armored, the kind of muscle you hire when you need a thing taken and do not care what breaks in the taking. And in front of them, leading them in, practically wagging, was Brask. I will not pretend I felt anything but hatred for him in that moment. He walked into the bay he had ruled for 30 cycles with the strut of a male who thinks he has just made himself rich, and he pointed one thick gray finger at bench 9, at the small human standing calm beside it, and he said, "That one, that's her, the Earthborn, the Kamir survivor." His jaw tusks clicked with greed. "You'll find the seal on her left wrist, 3 notches. I want my payment before you take her, as agreed." The lead veil, taller than the others, with a band of cold silver across its brow that probably meant rank, regarded Senna with those flat, reflective eyes. "Senna Verde," it said. Its voice was like ice cracking. "Garrison survivor, Kamir station, bearer of the 3-notch seal, you have been very difficult to locate." 11 years of effort on my part," Senna said. "Glad it inconvenienced you." The bay had gone dead silent. The other techs had frozen at their benches. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. You will come with us, the Veil said. The Khmer records are sealed, but they are not gone. There are parties who wish to examine what the Earthborn did at Khmer, how 1100 held against a war host. The galaxy was told it was stubbornness. My employers believe it was something else, something in the Earthborn that can be extracted, studied, replicated. It tilted its pale head. You are not being arrested, Verd. You are being harvested. There is a difference, though I doubt you will appreciate it. I saw Senna's hand drift, slow and casual, toward the seam of her coverall where the sidearm was. You came with 6, she said. For one tired artificer on a backwater station. Either you've heard the stories or you're being careful. A thin smile. Both, I hope. I'd hate to think 11 years of hiding was an overreaction. We came with 6, the Veil agreed, because the recordings of you are instructive. We are aware of what a single Earthborn did in the lower depot of Khmer. We do not intend to give you room to do it again. It gestured and the 2 mercenaries spread out, weapons rising. Come quietly and the rest of this bay lives. Resist and we kill everyone here and take you from the bodies. The choice is yours. I am told the Earthborn are sentimental about bystanders. Let us see if it is true. And that was the trap, you see. That was the thing they had learned from Khmer. They knew she would not run if it meant leaving others to die. They had read the recording. They had built their whole approach around the one weakness that was also her greatest strength. She would not abandon the people around her. It was a good trap. It was the right trap. It was also the wrong day to spring it, because they had made one mistake. They did not know about Korath. The Karvesh had not left Hinnock 9. I learned later why. His armor had been finished for 3 days, his repairs complete, his reason for being on the station gone. He should have shipped out. But he had stayed, booked his soldiers into a holding berth, made some excuse about resupply timing because he could not bring himself to leave the station where the soldier from the recording, the line that did not break, was hiding in plain sight. He had told himself he was guarding her secret. The truth, I think, is that he simply could not walk away from her. Some debts are older than meeting the person you owe them to. So when the unmarked ship docked, Korath had felt the same thing I had felt. He had gone to find Senna and found the bay sealed and the mercenaries already inside, and rather than charge in alone, he had done what war leaders do. He had gone and gotten his soldiers. The bay doors blew inward. Not blue, peeled. Dravoshi breaching charges do not make a hole, they make an opening. And through that opening came Korath of the Dravoshi in his rebuilt armor. The armor Senna's scarred hands had healed layer by patient layer. And behind him came 20 of his battalion, and the forge bay that had been silent and frozen became, in half a second, a battlefield. I will not give you the blow-by-blow. I was 16 and hiding behind a supply rack, and most of what I remember is noise and light and the smell of ozone. But I will tell you the parts that mattered. I will tell you that the 2 mercenaries went down first, fast, because 20 Dravoshi soldiers led by a Karvesh do not leave room for mercenary muscle to do its work. I will tell you that the 4 Veil were better, cold, precise, falling back into a defensive knot, their weapons carving bright lines through the smoke, and that for a few terrible seconds it was not clear which way it would go. And I will tell you what Senna Verd did, because that is the part the whole galaxy already half knew from a recording 11 years old, and the part I got to see with my own eyes. She did not hide. She did not let the Dravoshi do her fighting. The moment the doors blew, she moved, and I finally understood the recording, finally understood what a war host had feared, because the small, tired artificer who fixed armor at Bench 9 was suddenly somewhere else, something else, moving through the chaos of that bay with an economy that made the Dravoshi soldiers look slow. She did not move like a soldier, soldiers I had seen. She moved like the forge itself, like she knew exactly where every piece of metal and every body and every line of fire was, the way she knew where a soldier had been hit just by running her fingers along a seam. She read the fight the way she read armor, and she went straight for the lead Veil, the one with the silver band, the one who had said the word harvested like she was meat. It tried to bring its weapon around. She was already inside its reach. I did not see exactly what she did. It was too fast. But the lead veil went down, and its weapon clattered across the deck, and Senna Verde stood over it with her old human sidearm pressed to the silver band on its brow, and the entire bay went still because the fight was over, and everyone in it knew the fight was over. "You read the recording," she said to the veil on the floor. She was not even breathing hard. "But you didn't understand it. You thought Kamir was about something we had, something you could cut out of me and study and copy." She leaned down. "It wasn't. There's nothing in me to harvest. Kamir was about something we chose, and you can't extract a choice. You can only make it, and your people, the old species, you've never once been willing to make it. That's the whole secret. There never was another one." The veil said nothing. Its flat eyes reflected the orange furnace light. "Tell your employers the Earthborn are not a resource," Senna said. "Tell them we're a decision they've never had the spine to make. And tell them that the next ones who come for one of the 11 I'll know. We all will. There's 11 of us scattered across the galaxy living quiet lives, and you just taught every one of us that the quiet life was always going to end. So we'll stop hiding. And you really, really don't want 11 of us deciding to stop hiding." She stepped back. She holstered the sidearm. "Korath," she said, not looking away from the veil. "These 6 leave on their ship, alive, all of them. Send them home with the message." The Karvesh's jaw tusks clicked. "They came to harvest you. They would have killed everyone here." "And if I kill them, I'm what they think I am, a weapon," Senna said. "A thing. I spent 19 days at Kamir refusing to be the thing the galaxy decided I was. I'm not going to stop now because it'd be satisfying." Finally, she looked at him. "Let them carry the message. A message is worth more than 6 bodies. Trust me. I've been the message before." For a long moment, Korath looked at her. Then, slowly, he bowed, the second time I had seen it, that forehead low bow given only to those who have earned the right to be feared. And he gave the order, and his soldiers hauled the 6 survivors up and marched them back toward their unmarked ship, which left Brask. I had almost forgotten him, crouched behind the rack. He had not run. There had been nowhere to run to. He stood frozen against the wall where the fighting had pushed him, his greed curdled into terror, his wide gray head turning from Senna to Korath and back. "Karvesh," he started. You have to understand, I didn't know, I thought." "You knew," said Korath. His voice had gone back to grinding rock, and there was no gentleness in it now. "You heard a secret given in trust, and you sold it to slavers, and you would have watched this entire bay die for your payment. I should." "No," said Senna. Everyone looked at her. "Senna," Korath said, "this male. This male is a coward and a fool, and he just learned that being a coward and a fool nearly got him killed along with everyone he works beside," Senna said. She walked over to Brask. He flinched back against the wall, this huge Dravoshi cringing from a human a third his size. "Look at me, Brask." He looked at her. "You hated me from the first day," she said, "because I was better than you and I didn't make noise about it. And it ate at you, and when you found a way to be rid of me and get rich doing it, you took it without thinking once about the people in this bay, the junior techs, the apprentice." She did not look toward my hiding place, but I felt the words land on me anyway. "Cells 16, Brask. You'd have let them kill a 16-year-old for your payment." Brask said nothing. There was nothing to say. "I'm not going to hurt you," Senna said. "And I'm not going to let the Karvesh hurt you, because you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing 2 things. First, that a human you despised had your life in her hands and chose to give it back to you. Carry that. It'll be heavier than anything I could do to you." She paused. "And second, you'll know what you almost did. Every shift, every cycle, every time you walk into this bay and see the apprentice you almost got killed, you'll carry Kamir too now in your own small way. The choice you didn't have the spine to make. Welcome to it." And she turned her back on him, which, for a soldier, is the deepest contempt there is, to decide a male is not worth watching. Brask broke, not loudly. He just slid down the wall and sat on the deck of the bay he had ruled for 30 cycles, and he put his wide gray head in his hands, and he was, from that day, a different male, quieter, smaller. He never bragged again. He never touched his lucky wrench again either. I do not know why, but he left it on the bench and never picked it up. Some men carry their shame in strange ways. The unmarked ship undocked an hour later and was never seen in the corridor again. And that almost was the end of it. I came out from behind the supply rack when the bay had cleared. I did not mean to. My legs just brought me out, shaking, and I stood there in the wreckage of the breaching charges with slag dust on my hands, and Senna Verde looked at me. "I told you to stay down," she said. "I know. You didn't stay down." "No." She looked at me for a long moment, and then, and this is the thing I have carried all these years, the thing that means more to me than any of it, she smiled. "The real one, the rare one." "Good," she said. "Somebody should have been watching. Somebody should be able to tell it." She walked over and put one scarred hand on my shoulder, and it was the only time she ever touched me. "But you tell it right, Sel, you hear me. When you tell it, and you will, I can see it in you, you've got the look of someone who's going to carry this, you tell it right. Kamir wasn't about how many we killed. It was about the 3,000 we kept alive. Tell the part about staying, not the part about fighting. The fighting's not the point. The fighting's never the point." "I'll tell it right," I said. My voice cracked. I was 16 and I had just watched a legend hand me her story like a tool I was now responsible for. "I promise." She nodded. She squeezed my shoulder once. Then she went back to bench 9 and she picked up the greave she had been working on when all of this started, and she finished the repair. Because that was who she was. The galaxy had come to harvest her. She had faced down 6 killers and refused to become the weapon they wanted her to be. And when it was over, she sat down and finished fixing a soldier's armor so that one more soldier would come home alive. The quiet life, taken up again, like a tool set down and picked back up. She left Hennick 9 a few cycles later. She had to. Brask's mistake had put her on a map, and a map is a dangerous thing for one of the 11. Korath offered her a place in his war house, protection, honor, a war leader's debt repaid. She turned it down. She told him she did not want to be guarded. She wanted to be useful. There was a difference, she said, and the war host that came for her had failed to understand it, and she would not let her own people fail to understand it either. She took a contract on another backwater forge in another corner of the dark, under another name, fixing armor for soldiers who would never know whose scarred hands were keeping them alive, becoming nobody again, on purpose, by choice. That was the last I saw of her. Korath stayed in touch with me strangely. The Karvesh and the apprentice, an odd correspondence, but a real one. He is the one who gave me the recording chit, years later, the Kamir transmission from his warhouse archive, the one they show to young war leaders. He thought I should have it. He thought the witness should have the proof. I have watched it more times than I can count. The image is degraded, 11 years old when I got it and more now. But you can see her, younger, bleeding from a wound in her side, standing in the lower depot of Kamir Station with 3,000 terrified civilians behind her and a war host inbound, and she is speaking into the enemy's own channel in the enemy's own tongue, and the translation runs along the bottom of the recording, and it says, "There are children behind me. You will have to come through me to reach them. I am told there are 100,000 of you. I am one human and I am very tired. Come anyway. Bring all 100,000. I will be standing here." And the thing about the recording, the thing that made a war leader fear her his whole life, the thing the veil wanted to cut open and study, is that she was not boasting. She was not afraid. She was just stating a fact. I will be standing here, the way you would state the weather. The way she told me not to use a red band coupler in a vacuum suit. A simple true thing, delivered plain, by someone who had already decided and was at peace with the deciding. That is what the Earthborn seal means. That is what humans brought into the war that the old species, in all their long history, had never managed to bring. Not strength, not numbers, Not some secret you could harvest from a wrist with 3 notches burned into it. Just a willingness to stand between the dark and the helpless and say come anyway, and mean it and stay. I am old now, older than Senna was that day in the forge bay. I have told this story 400 times and I will tell it 400 more, because I promised her I would tell it right, and a promise made to the line that did not break is not a thing you set down. So when the recruits ask me, and they always ask, what the Earthborn seal means, I do not tell them about the fight in the bay. I do not tell them about the 6 killers or the breaching charges or the war leader's bow. I tell them about the 3,000. I tell them about staying. And then I tell them the last thing she ever said to me, the thing I have carried across all these years, the thing I will carry until I set down my own tools for the last time. The fighting's never the point. Anybody can fight. The point is who you're willing to stand in front of, and whether you'll still be standing there when it would be so much easier to be gone. She was always standing there. That was the whole secret. There never was another one.